So Burna Boy is an artist who has been around for a very, very long time. To be exact, his career pretty much has been spanning since 2012 up until now and until further notice. But to see that within the last 2 to 3 years, the amount of success and recognition he's gained has been amazing, but it's also been well deserved for the grind that he's been on. And for someone that's been doing it for that long, it really makes sense as to why his fans, including someone like myself, champions him so much in his career. The fact that with the rise of his song Yay, but also with the release of African Giant, the way in which he's been able to take this newfound fame and propel it to new heights, but also at the same time maintain that, is something that is well deserved and actually needs its recognition where it's due. For any artist that gains any form of massive stardom through a song or through a project, to maintain and keep that is not easy. And you often find that some artists either tend to fall off or they tend to rise to the occasion. And in Burna Boy's cases, he rose to the occasion. It seems that every song since the rise of Ye has allowed him to just put his Midas touch on every single track that he was on. From the track list in African Giant, but all the features that he was in, from Georgia Smith to Dave to Stormzy to Mahalia to even Beyonce, and now with his recent collaboration on Twice as Tall, partnering with Diddy as an executive producer, it really makes us think whether Burna Boy is going to stop at any point. And I genuinely hope that he doesn't, because he's been massively just propelling himself continuously throughout his whole career. And again, to reference African Giant, which, to be honest, is one of the best albums of 2019, but on top of that, can be placed in the same catalogue as one of the best Afrobeat albums, period, shows that Burna Boy has been continuously in the thought process of looking to create something that is very cohesive but pays homage to his roots as a Nigerian man. His constant references to Fela Kuti, which makes sense seeing as his grandparents, or one of his grandparents, was actually a previous manager of Fela Kuti. You understand that his family, as well as him, come from a lineage of musicians, but people who are well articulate within the music industry. So it only makes sense that from now onwards, Burna Boy is continuously putting himself in situations where he's trying to place himself in the right rooms, but make the right decisions at the same time to create the best music possible. And that was very reflective when listening to African Giant. And now with the release of the album Twice as Tall, it's the first time that I genuinely started to realize certain things about Burna Boy, but at the same time, it was the first time that I genuinely started to question some of the decisions made when this album was being listened to. I remember a couple weeks ago, I saw a tweet that reported that Diddy and Burna Boy were working on an album. And my first reaction was that it would be fake news, but not particularly because of the fact that it's Diddy and it's Burna Boy. Just because Diddy is someone who's always preached about working in Africa, even though he never specified which country. But also at the same time, the time in which he'd been speaking about it till about now, there hasn't really been much substance within that. So to hear that he's now collaborated with Burna Boy to make an album, and it came as soon as it did, I really started to think about how this album was going to sound. And the reception that it came from on Twitter was that Diddy might either butcher this or he might butcher this. And so listening to this album, there's quite a few things that I want to say. And so if I was to listen to this album and give a review on the first time that I listened to it, this review would have been very, very quick. But I had to listen to it multiple times to not only prove certain points that I had made, but at the same time think about ways in which this album is so different from his previous one. And that's what we're here for today. And so as usual, my name's Archie, and today I'm going to be reviewing Burna Boy's latest album, Twice as Tall. Cue my intro, please. Now, the one thing I noticed is that when you're working on an album that essentially is being executively produced by someone who might share different viewpoints or isn't as well versed into the realm of Afrobeats or any other genre, you have to understand that some of the decisions and choices that are going to be made in this album aren't necessarily going to be fully reflective of that individual artist, in this case Burna Boy, but also at the same time there's going to be certain songs and certain ways in which the album is going to be structured and steered. And that is probably one of the most notable things that I noticed when listening to this album. From the first instance, you hear a sample from Pat Boone's Twice as Tall, and then it goes on to hear Diddy speaking again. And that's something that is not a surprise. And I feel like that is not needed, Diddy. Uncle Diddy, I'm being honest with you, that is not needed at all. The reason why I say this is that it just takes away from the overall flow of the album, but doesn't really provide any necessary things or pieces of information that we don't know already. It's not the 90s anymore. And at the same time, this form of structuring a song before the beat drops or before we actually hear the contents of the song is something that is not needed whatsoever. And I think that's the one thing that kind of set a bad tone and a bad start to the album, in my opinion, which then would lead people like myself, but other people who listen to it, to have a pretty standoffish opinion on how the rest of the album is going to sound, if the first introduction to the album is going to sound like this. And that's one thing that I noticed when listening to this album, is that there are songs that clearly left a bad taste in my mouth. But also at the same time, you can tell that there are songs in this album that are trying to push more to the commercial side. You can tell when listening to it that there's a certain agenda behind it, whether it be for more radio plays, whether it be for more commercial plays, whether it be for other business ventures that the song could go into. And that's something that, in my opinion, was very noticeable when listening to this song. And I'll probably go into it later on in this video as we speak about the track by track list. It just seemed like to me that the songs that were kind of pushing for more the commercial versions of Afrobeats just seemed like they lacked in production. They were very watered down. They weren't very expressive of who Burna Boy was. Now, bear in mind, there are tracks in this song that are very good and also at the same time have a very accurate reflection as to who Burna Boy is and the type of sound that he does as well. And another interesting thing that I started to realize was the fact that Burna Boy isn't the issue here when listening to the album. The main problem is the fact that some of the productions lacked. I personally believe that there were very poor choices in certain songs that did not need to be on this album, which I will definitely get into. But at the same time, when you listen to African Giant, Kel P is one of the most prolific and most consistent producers on that album, and we all know how that album turned out. But when you listen to this one, there is a massive distinction between the level of and amount of producers that are on this album, Twice as Tall, compared to the amount of producers that was on African Giant. And so it made me understand that Burna Boy needs a producer or producers who can really cater to his taste, who can really cater to his type of vibe, but who can also cater to his type of sound. And I felt like that wasn't fully accurately represented within this album. There was a very few amount of songs that I felt like did that. So enough of me kind of giving you a general consensus about how I felt about the album. I think I'm just going to go through track by track what I thought of each song, and then probably give you my overall thoughts about how I felt in general. The first track, Level Up, like I said, starts off with a sample of Pat Boone, Twice as Tall, and then proceeds to go into a production that I felt like was made very loosely on Fruity Loops or very poorly used on Logic. The production, I felt, for me was probably the poorest I've heard on this album, but it doesn't take away from the fact that Burna Boy really provides us with some very introspective lyrics about not giving up, or about moments where he was in his career where he felt like he was continuously trying or not going anywhere, but he still had to fight his demons and continue. Moments where he reached a particular low when he kept on trying to consistently fight for his career to grow, to now being in moments where he sold out Wembley, mind you, which I went to, and I absolutely wilded out. But it shows that Burna Boy has reached a point in his career where he's very grateful, but he's not going to stop now that he's reached this point in his career. And that for me was something that was the most introspective version of Burna Boy that I've ever heard. And he provided some very good enunciations and lyrics about how that reflects within him as a person. Moving on to track number 2, which was Alarm Clock, which just starts off with just Diddy speaking again. Oh my days. Alarm Clock could have been one of the best songs on the album, but also at the same time one of Burna Boy's best songs. But there's a number of things that really frustrated me. The first of which is that Diddy speaks for 40 seconds, and the second part is that the song was short. By the time Diddy stopped speaking, and the beat drops and you just get filled with just mad energy to do whatever footwork that I probably can't even do, and to the point where it ends off on a note where you want more but it just stops. And for me, that was probably one of the most frustrating things when listening to this song, is that Diddy speaks for a third of it, but then also at the same time it just ends pretty abruptly, which is what I did not want. And so something that could have been the best song on the album ended up kind of being the opposite. And might I add, actually, when going back to Level Up, Twice as Tall, I didn't particularly like the feature that was on the song. I just felt like it wasn't necessary. I don't really feel like it provided anything useful to the song. It was kind of jarring to listen to, if I'm being honest. And so I felt like the production could have improved, but also at the same time the feature just shouldn't have been there, which is a recurring theme in this album as well. And again, I'll get to as we go along throughout this album. Moving on to Way Too Big, which is a song that is evidently made for commercial uses. I personally did not like this track. Burna Boy again does what he does best, but the production behind this, I think Timbaland produced this track, but it just wasn't it for me. I just didn't connect with it. I didn't vibe with it at all. It was very poppy, I guess, but you can tell when listening to it that it's one of those songs. I can't put my finger in it, but it's one of those commercial type songs. Everything picks back up with Bebo, which I love the energy behind this song. I love the production behind this song. It's very reflective of who Burna Boy is and the type of vibe that he needs to be on. And this is a type of song, the way it was produced, the way it was made. Again, I've got nothing to say pretty much about Burna Boy's lyrics and what he does, because he does it pretty well. It really just showed how much it's important to sort of maintain this vibe, even though he's gone out and done various things which you can evidently hear throughout his features with other artists. He does very well, and that's why it's important when you listen to stuff like Bebo, but then other features where he's done well, that there's a particular way in which you orchestrate a song for it to sound well, and Bebo is a good reflection of that. Wonderful is another one of those songs where I really love the beginning of it. The harmonies, the way everything was just stripped back, but the vocals and just allowed for that a cappella to continue was something that I was really, really, really enjoying. I probably would have chosen a different type of instrumental or different type of production on the back of it when the beat dropped, but overall there was nothing that I could complain about the song. I did enjoy it, I did like it, and I think hearing those harmonies from Burna Boy was something that was really, really, really nice. It reminded me of one of Yvonne Shaka Shaka's song. It really reminded me of how stripped back and how nice those vocals were, and that's something I really enjoyed about the song Wonderful. Moving on to Onyeka slash Baby. This song just makes me want to have a bottle of Rare Nephews in one hand, a glass in the other, and just shoulder shake at a brunch or shoulder shake at a motive. The way this song just starts off, the way Burna Boy just carries everything, the way it's produced, is just something that I genuinely enjoyed and loved about this song, and I cannot complain. It was a very good track. Burna Boy just provides the best lyrics that he can, but also at the same time just provides a very, very good outlook on the type of music that he thrives in. So for me, Onyeka was a very, very, very good song. Naughty by Nature, featuring Naughty by Nature. Jeez, I don't even know what to say. To be honest with you, there's not really much I'm going to say. The song was bad. The features, Naughty by Nature, was just terrible. Wasn't meant to be there. Shouldn't have been there. Lyrics were terrible. Yeah, we're just moving on from that. The next song on the list is Comma. This song reminds me of how much I need to get my footwork down. And I'll probably get my sisters to teach me, because this tune is just... I just want to open up a mosh pit, open up a hole in a rave, and just go in. Do you know what I'm saying? So after Comma, Nuffy Vex, and also 23 are songs that really start to show much more of Burna Boy's different attempts and different takes that he thrives in. The album then starts to sort of open up a bit more and kind of give us more of a better consistent vibe as to who Burna Boy is, but also a different take to what we heard in African Giant as well, which is something that I appreciate. But listening to this album, it just showed me how inconsistent some of the songs were. and it just wasn't structured well enough for me to actually be like, okay, cool, yeah, you know what, like, this is dope, I enjoy this. I was going through a musical roller coaster when listening to this album. We then move on to Time Flies, which is a good song, but again, the features by Sauti Sol I felt like was good, but then I really dislike when features have lyrics speaking about me and Burna Boy are here to make another banger, or me and this other artist are here to mess stuff up. Like, no. Just no. There's a way in which features can thrive really well in this album, but I felt like every attempt to do so, they didn't do it. The only person who managed to do it very well was Stormzy, and I felt like his vocals have improved. If I'm not mistaken, they've definitely improved from the last time, but he's probably the only example in this album where he provides a good feature. The rest of them, Sauti Sol was okay up until a certain point, and I said, yeah, you know what, I'm just checking out. And this next song with, oh gosh, and this next feature with Chris Martin, lead singer for Coldplay, which I love, but Monsters is just not it. Monsters is probably one of the worst songs I've heard this year. That's not even an exaggeration. But also at the same time, oh my gosh, why was this song even attempted to be made in the first? Do you know what? Burna Boy has a song with Sam Smith, right? Which is very good. But then you have Chris Martin on this song, and everything about it just screams no. It just screams no. And so I just was so frustrated when I saw Chris Martin's name and I said yes. And I heard the song and I said no. It was just reflective of how much this album needed to go through a couple vetting processes before deciding on the final track list. And then you have songs like Written This Up and Real Life, again with Stormzy, and Bank on It, which rounds off the album, which are very, very good songs. And so when you have someone who's an executive producer like Diddy come on this album, it's testament to my point that firstly, you really need to find someone or have someone who oversees this album who shares pretty much similar sentiments to you, but also can help you have free reign in a way that will allow you to have a track list that accurately reflects the type of music you make. That's the thing about this album that really put me on, again, a musical roller coaster, but really made me start to question the way in which we have American involvement in Afrobeat albums. They need to be done in this particular way where it doesn't seem like they're too focused and pandering towards Afrobeats, but also trying to bring them to their side and commercialize Afrobeats to what it was. With Beyonce's attempt at making Black is King, even though for me one of the criticisms I had for that album was the fact that I feel like more East African and more South African artists should have been featured on the album, she did a good attempt at bringing the most prominent Afrobeat artists in one cohesive project and letting them have free reign as to what they want to do. Her features again with Shatta Wale is a very good example as to how you can have American involvement with someone like Beyonce and a very prominent Afrobeat artist like Shatta Wale and do something very well together without it being too boring or too jarring. And so when listening to this album, I've got very polarizing views when listening to it, but Burna Boy himself is not the issue. It's more towards the executive direction when creating this project. And as someone who would naturally, and everyone who listens to this album will naturally compare this to African Giant, it's testimony to how you need to have producers or people or a team of people that can accurately understand who you are as an artist. Kelpie done a very good example as well as other producers on African Giant, but I feel like the same wasn't reflected in this one. And so for me, it was a very decent album. There are particular songs that I would go back to from time to time, but more so that's pretty much it. And on top of that, that is the review, that is my opinion, that is what I think of Burna Boy's Twice as Tall album. Quite a lot to get through, but thank you very much if you've made it this far for listening and for watching. I really, as always, appreciate you, and I'm just thankful that I get to have this platform that I can just make and review music. And so as always, if you like the content, if you appreciate what I have to say, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, turn the notification bell on so that you get notified when I release a new video. And as always, I've been Archie, and thank you very much for listening. Peace.